Welcome back to the second part of FtLoC 10, where we'll be covering the news, the motorsport news, and a few other bits and pieces.
Right, well, we've taken the time while you've been watching that to drive with the windows down to get some fresh air in here so we can wind those back up. So that was our stuff from Le Mans. Presumably, I'm having a very good time. Thanks, future Drew. Another film that's gone out on the site very, very recently was the film that you went out with George to film on the Dawn, the Rolls-Royce Dawn.
Yes.
Hopefully you've seen it. And it is a great review. But what steals the show, not that your pieces to camera aren't great.
No, but it was the whole point of going, the idea was to go and get these bits.
Is the bit at the end. We can show you some shots here. Wonderful time-lapse sequences of the night sky. Tell us about the location for starters. Why there?
Well, here's another behind-the-scenes thing. It wasn't meant to be there. It was originally going to be, my original idea was to go up to Scotland and the Dumfries and Galloway Forest, because that is meant to be the very best place in the UK for stargazing, for one of these sort of dark sky sites. But the weather, typically on the week that we had the Rolls-Royce, and obviously we wanted to pick a week when there was no moon, or the moon was sort of waning its most, I suppose. And so, yeah, that was our opportunity. And so we thought, right, running up there, Cornwall looks good, and Bodmin has a dark sky site as well, so it all worked out well in the end. But that's just how these things go sometimes. So
that was you'd done all the shoot all day, and then presumably had to stay up all night to capture those nighttime shots.
We drove down there, and then sort of took most of the day to get down there. Then stayed up all the first night. Ended up we didn't use any of the time lapses from the first night. So actually, they're still beautiful, but they've got clouds, and it felt sort of painful not putting them in because you've spent an entire night shooting them. But it was nonetheless better to use the second night one. So we drove down there one day, stayed up all night shooting, had a few hours sleep, got up, shot the daytime pieces, and down by the coast, and then didn't go to bed. We just had some supper, and then went back out again to the same site to go and shoot on the second night. That was it. But it was very much, we were up till 5:30 in the morning. Actually, in the Land Rover, we took the Land Rover Discovery Sport down there, used it as a support vehicle, and we all just went to sleep in that, basically. So we all tried to, whilst the time lapses were there doing their thing for 3 or 4 hours.
This is a good time as any to kind of talk about the long-term update. So it was basically a mobile hotel room for you out on the on the Rolls-Royce shoot.
Yeah, very much so. And it was brilliant again. And actually, one of the features I really like about it is you can slide the middle bench seats backwards and forwards, which is quite helpful when I'm sitting in the back. But yeah, it was very good on that shoot, as it has been before, down the tiny lanes. Then it had another load of stuff in it because when I went to hold out, I took my bike with me, so yeah, there was a load of stuff in the car for that loaded up. And then I actually managed to get some decent MPG out of it, bizarrely. Drove with my parents just on the motorway 725 M1, and 35.7 MPG in eco mode, admittedly, but that's significantly more than we've managed in the past.
Well, while you had that car, we obviously needed something to get ourselves around, and we borrowed an X-Class, which was our form of transport for a couple of days, and it was nice to be back in a pickup truck, but it still just feels like a Nissan Navara with a three-pointed star. Yeah, you're getting a slightly improved interior trim, but it was a brilliant car to have. I did miss the disco though. I'm looking forward to getting it back in and taking it back out for a spin. One last film that will be out by the time that you listen to this / watch this is I had a slightly more in-depth look at the Brabham BT62. We were at the launch a couple of weeks ago at Australia House. It sits right on the cusp of, it is just kind of raw and exposed enough to feel like weight has been saved, it's functional, and you get that real race car feel.
Yeah.
But there is just enough level of refinement to make you feel not too bad about spending £1 million on the car. As we're filming this section very early, for FtLoC, which will be going out more than a week from now, we're going to record the news section a little bit later, which we can cut to, again, by the miracle of editing, now.
Right, we've jumped into the studio and indeed forward by a couple of days to do the news.
Hello, future Drew.
Hello, future Henry. We recorded the Master section back on Thursday, and obviously Le Mans was last weekend, and now I believe it's Tuesday, but my mind is a little bit frazzled from the fact that...
You can even tell I've been on the McLaren Senna launch since then, because I've got a McLaren pen with me, so there you go.
There you go.
That's about all I can tell you about the McLaren Senna.
There's a lot to cover in motorsport news, obviously with Le Mans just been, but there's a couple of cars that I know you're just itching to talk about.
Yes, yeah, sort of some little small cars actually. Starting with the Suzuki Jimny, which we've seen some pictures of. Cool little thing, and it was always a favourite of off-roaders because it was light and therefore actually surprisingly capable off-road, I think, the Jimny. But the new one, they haven't released any sort of stuff about engines. That's the thing. I think it's going to be unveiled properly in Japan later this summer. But it looks like a mini G-Wagon, certainly from the back.
The proportions, yeah, it looks almost like, if you see it in real life, that it's then like a half-size model that you sit on top of rather than sit inside.
Exactly, certainly if you're as tall as me, it's sort of going to be a bit bizarre. But I just thought it looked really cool. So the other car that I want to talk about was the new Audi A1, which they've unveiled.
Yes, I mean that's a cracking little platform. We've seen some cool stuff done with it before. But
I love the old S1, which I think there will be a new S1 next year with like 250 brake horsepower, something like that. So they've announced, I think it's 3 engines. You've got the entry level 1 litre 3-cylinder. They're all petrol, no diesels. 1.5 litre and a 2 litre, both 4 pots. Those. But the thing for starters, inside, it's got a lot of tech from the A8 seemingly, also trickle down sort of tech, so touchscreen stuff. So that looks pretty cool in a small car. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that under the bonnet, it's got the 3 little slits sort of between bonnet and grille, aping the 80s Sport Quattro.
Okay.
It's one of those things you look at it and go, that's a bit weird. Why have they done that? Until you realise and then it becomes exceptionally cool, basically. At the other end of the scale, just quickly as well, RM Sotheby's, which is now they're not just auctions, they're doing private sales as well. And to sort of kick it all off, they've got a McLaren F1, and it's quite a special one because it's one of only 2 outside. So there were 5 LMs plus the prototype one which McLaren kept, which were the orange cars. But 2 road-going F1s also had the LM engine in, which I think took power up to like 680 brake horsepower.
Which is even a lot by today's standards. Yeah, exactly, 20 years on. Yes, motorsport news. Now it's been a crazy couple of days because we've had Le Mans, but not just because of Le Mans. But let's start there. Big win for Toyota. We already alluded at it in the stuff we were talking about earlier, and I think everyone had them down as a favourite, and they absolutely dominated from beginning to end, with Alonso taking the checkered flag, making now having 2/3 of his Triple Crown.
Yep.
With just is it the Indy 500 left to get, which he failed to get last year,
but showed a lot of promise. So.
Yes, so if anyone can get it, he can, and it would be fantastic. They dominated so hard that even though the second place car had, I think, 2 drive-through penalties towards the end, there was still no one anywhere near them. And in fact, that also separated the front 2 Toyotas. So we didn't even really see a battle between the only 2 cars that could put up a fight. So
there was lots of outpouring of love for Toyota, and absolutely, I was there when they failed to win it, and just good grief, it was heartbreaking. But but then again, it's a 24-hour race, not a 23 hours and 56 minutes if you're going to be really harsh.
Absolutely.
And it's very difficult because it did look like a bit of a procession, really. However, I saw somebody, Jamie Price, the photographer, actually on Instagram, I think, put up various reasons. They said, Toyota didn't ask Audi and Porsche to pull out of LMP1.
Correct.
Class, so fair enough. It's not their choice to be racing on their own in the class. The other big point is that they were actually very much on for a lap or a record number of laps in the class, or a distance record, I suppose. And LMP2 has only just been decided.
Well, this is it. LMP2 was arguably not overlooked, but was certainly not given the attention it may now, in retrospect, have deserved. The race was dominated by the G-Drive, the number 26 car, which, much like the Toyota, dominated and held the the lead for the entire race, and the other car from that team had the
But it
fourth
had
place.
suspiciously quick fuel stops.
Suspiciously. Now, there's less, again, being technical, there's less restriction. There isn't a minimum time for refueling in LMP2, whereas there is in other categories. It's slightly freer in that regard. The G-Drive team took the win and took the podium and went home. And then yesterday evening, as we're recording this, so that's Monday evening, it was revealed that they and the other car, which came fourth, had been disqualified for adding a non-homologated part to the fuel restrictor.
Yeah, it was a machined part, basically.
A machined part, which altered the aperture of the fuel hole.
I understood hole in that. But
fuel hole. I'm not.
They managed to refuel more quickly.
Refuel more.
It wasn't going
quickly.
click, 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 click.
Yeah, they were able to fuel quicker, and they maintain that the specification that has been changed was not specifically described in the rulebook. FIA says yes, it was, and they've had it stripped from them, which means they got all the pomp and circumstance of getting to stand on the podium, but will not be noted down in the history books as the winner.
And the number 4 finisher, or fourth place finisher, was also from that team, so also had its place stripped. So in fact, number 5 now ends up standing on, fifth place finisher ends up standing on the bottom step of the podium.
Yeah.
Except of course they don't, because everyone's gone home. So
I mean, they could go back.
they could go back and go, yay.
So this, assuming that this will be appealed, but it's an ongoing story. But it means that all the drama in LMP2 actually happened the day after the race, which was bizarre. There are obviously 2 more races.
Porsche. That's pretty much all we need to say, isn't it?
They absolutely dominated as well, and
obviously the Dempsey team won the GT Am as well.
I know Patrick Dempsey, who is an actor,
with a Porsche.
Who has raced at Le Mans in the GTAM category. You know him from, I think he's in Grey's Anatomy. But there is change afoot for WEC and with it Le Mans. Just before the race started, announcements were made for a new replacement for LMP1 starting in 2020, running at least until 2024 for a hypercar class of race. What this will mean is that the current breed of hybrid hypercars will go, and what we'll get instead is a class where aesthetics is actually a factor. That these are going to be cars where aerodynamics is not going to be prioritized over aesthetics. These are going to be probably, we haven't had all the details yet, it's worth mentioning, but probably adapted road cars from the manufacturers who you might already recognize from this kind of field. Probably still hybrid with KER systems and all-wheel drive, but we might be seeing the likes of Aston Martin, McLaren, who knows, Koenigsegg, who else might put their hat in the ring. And what this will mean is that a return to that era, like in the late 90s, where you were seeing stuff
GT1
like
class.
Exactly, the GT1 classes, where you were seeing cars which were the kind you could in theory see versions of out on the road racing at Le Mans.
Yeah, that would be really cool, wouldn't it? And actually there was one of the support races that got quite a lot of coverage, was the Aston Martin one, which of course was won by a Vulcan.
With a famous driver.
Yeah.
Wasn't Harris Monkey driving that one?
Oh, he was. Oh, you meant him as the famous driver?
Yeah.
So, I love Joy was in the car with him. He set the pole time. So
yes. No, I missed it, unfortunately, and I feel like I should have watched that one instead, because it looked like it was a much more entertaining race. We're still rolling, so we can literally say anything we want while you're away.
Woohoo! Yeah, George is out of the room.
That's dangerous.
Yeah. So whilst he's out of the room, actually, we can talk about George's MGB.
Yeah.
Which, the rear brakes failed on it.
Yes, I heard.
Yeah. He had to exit a car park through a hedge, through a hole in a hedge. And then his rear brakes failed. The thing I love about this is that he wasn't sure whether it was there was something wrong with the car, or whether it was just slightly tricky weather conditions.
because it's got drum rears. So with drum rears, you've got a 50% chance they won't work properly anyway on a car that old.
I don't care if it's holding a wooden stick on the rear tyres. It was still just, I love the fact he had no idea whether it was actually something wrong with it or whether it was just the weather. So
it's a lovely little car, and
I wouldn't go that far. I mean, it's got rubber bumpers for crying out loud. But
it does have rubber bumpers. That is a bit weird. He recently got the key stuck in the ignition. It wouldn't come out, so he just had to he had to disconnect the battery to stop the car. So he had to stall it into place and then disconnect. Oh,
you'll enjoy that section, George.
There you go. Right, moving away from endurance racing to Formula One. We're between a couple of races at the moment, but the news breaking today is Red Bull. Red Bull, who have been with Renault as their engine manufacturer for a dozen years or so.
We've got to assume that because Red Bull's announced this, I mean, I know they haven't been keen on Renault, but they must like what they've seen within Toro Rosso. That's the only way. They've got this test bed. It's sort of it's the same with their junior drivers, really, isn't it?
Exactly
the junior drivers don't get promoted from Toro Rosso into Red Bull unless they like what they see. So
or Seb Vettel complains about them.
Quite. So it's presumably the same with the engine. It seems very odd. I saw some rumours that this was a potential way for Red Bull to get out of F1 entirely, so that Honda would gradually take it over as a sort of manufacturer and take over the Red Bull team.
In terms of Formula One, that's all I had to say at the moment. So unless you have anything more to add to this jam-packed episode of FtLoC.
Can I talk about WRC?
Oh, of course you can.
Oh, right. Well, it was a very exciting WRC, much more exciting than the Canadian Grand Prix that was going on at the same time. And it came down to the power stage right at the end. Sébastien Ogier was leading by 0.8 seconds going to the power stage, and it was over Thierry Neuville, and so you had the two championship contenders fighting for the win, and that's pretty rare, and it was fantastic power stage, both absolutely going up. Thierry Neuville was up on two wheels at one point, at which point his co-driver said, I think that's probably the limit of what we should be doing here. And but yeah, Neuville came through for the win, historic win really for him, and so he's now got 27-point lead in the championship, which is more than a victory clear of Sébastien Ogier. So now we will really see what Ogier he's got his back up against the wall, and we'll see how it goes. It's poised for a fantastic season.
Fantastic. How long is the season in WRC? Is it as long?
It's all the way through to October. So.
Okay, so plenty of time for that to turn around.
Yeah, we're halfway through the season at the moment. So.
Okay, well, there you have it. It's been a 3 time zoned, multi-location, multi-dimensional episode of FtLoC, and it's our 10th episode, actually. Thank you so much for sticking with us so long. We've really enjoyed doing these, and it helps us bring you a couple of extra bits and pieces that we would normally just talk about amongst ourselves and actually get to share it with you.
Do you want to mention the podcast as well? Because that's now up and running, isn't it? So,
yes.
Which might be extended given how long a lot of this has been.
Absolutely. So many of you have asked for it, and we started with the previous episode, but there is now an audio podcast available of FtLoC. You can find it on iTunes or hopefully a few other places, Google and Stitcher and anywhere else you might like to get your podcasts. You can find the audio version, the Carfection for the Love of Cars podcast. Now, that will be an extended audio-only version of what you see here on YouTube, but there will also be some extra bits that don't make it into this episode at all, bits that we record in between episodes and add in separately. It's well worth a listen. It's probably good for a commute or a long run if you're inclined to do such a thing. And if you do like it and you enjoy it, consider leaving it a review and maybe 5 stars on iTunes, and it'll help other people find it, which would be most helpful. If you're listening to this on the podcast, thank you very much for downloading it. We hope you enjoy it, and we would love to hear your feedback. You can always get hold of us on Twitter. If you want to talk about the show in particular, use the hashtag Carfection Chat. We are at Carfection on Twitter, and if you like to follow us on Instagram, we are at Carfection Films. I wholeheartedly encourage you to follow Henry on both of those as well, at Henry Catchpole. And if you fancy giving me a follow on all the platforms, I am at Drew Stern. And look for the Carfection page on Facebook. But for now, from FtLoC, from myself and from Henry, it's goodbye, and we'll see you next time.
Goodbye.